The scent of lilies clung to the air, thick and suffocating. I sat stiffly in the front row, my hands balled into fists in my lap, trying to steady my breathing. The room was full of murmured condolences and empty gestures, people dabbing at their eyes as if they'd lost something. But they hadn't. Not really. None of them knew him like I did. None of them had been there during the late nights when his hands, worn from time and experience, rested over mine as he promised. "You'll be taken care of, Natasha. No matter what." That promise had been my anchor. And now, he was gone. I focused on the casket, dark mahogany, polished to perfection, just the way he would have wanted. He had always believed in dignity, in doing things the right way. I told myself not to cry, not in front of them. This wasn't just grief. I had lost the only person who had ever truly stood by me, but at least I still had his promise. The thought gave me something to hold on to, something solid amidst the weight of loss pressing against my ribs. When the will was read, I sat up straighter, ready to hear what I already knew in my heart. I was his granddaughter, the only one who had stayed by his side, the only one who mattered. But as the lawyer continued speaking, I felt my world tilt. My name never came. The estate, the accounts, the properties, all listed, but never once in my name. And then I heard it. Jane. Everything was hers, every last piece of what should have been mine. I turned to her, my pulse hammering in my ears. She didn't look at me, didn't need to. She already knew. She sat there, composed, smug even, as if she had been waiting for this moment. My throat tightened as I looked around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to react, to object, to say this isn't right. But all I saw were polite nods, expressions of quiet acceptance, as if I had never even been a part of this family to begin with. A cold, hollow feeling settled in my stomach. I wanted to speak, to protest, but my mouth felt dry, my tongue heavy. I glanced at the lawyer, waiting for him to correct this mistake, to say there had been some oversight. But he simply adjusted his glasses and continued reading, his voice detached, clinical. This was no mistake. This was intentional. I turned toward Jane again, studying the smooth way she crossed her legs, the satisfied curve of her lips. She knew. She had known all along. The way she avoided my gaze wasn't guilt. It was triumph. She had orchestrated this, planned every move. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, each thump a reminder of how utterly blindsided I had been. How had I not seen this coming? I tried to catch my uncle's eye, then my cousin's, searching for some kind of solidarity, some acknowledgement that this wasn't fair. But all I got were blank stares, as if I was making a scene over something trivial. Let it go, Natasha. It's already done. Their silence spoke louder than words. They had no intention of standing up for me. Maybe they had even known. Maybe they had been waiting for this, watching it unfold like a slow-burning tragedy. A lump formed in my throat, thick and unrelenting. I clenched my fists, nails pressing into my palms to ground myself. I wasn't just mourning my grandfather anymore. I was mourning the trust I had in this family, the belief that I had a place among them. Because now, sitting in that suffocating room, I realized the truth. Jane hadn't just taken what was mine. She had erased me entirely. I forced myself to stay seated, to breathe through the rising tide of anger threatening to pull me under. This wasn't the time to react. Not yet. If I exploded now, it would only feed into whatever narrative they had crafted about me. Emotional, ungrateful, unworthy. No, I needed to be patient. But the betrayal burned through me, spreading like poison in my veins. Jane finally turned toward me, her expression calm, almost amused, as if daring me to challenge her. Go ahead, make a scene, her eyes seemed to say. I held her gaze, refusing to give her the satisfaction of watching me crumble. But inside, something shifted. I had spent my life believing that fairness mattered, that integrity would always win. But this wasn't a mistake or some clerical error. This was deliberate, calculated. And Jane had done it, knowing no one would stop her. A distant memory surfaced, my grandfather's voice, steady and warm. People will take from you if you let them, Natasha. You have to know when to fight back. Until now, I had never understood what he meant. But I did now. This wasn't about money. It wasn't even about the inheritance. This was about erasing his wishes, rewriting the story to suit Jane's greed. And if they thought I would accept that, they didn't know me at all. I swallowed hard, smoothing my hands over my dress as I sat up straighter. I wouldn't argue. Not here. Not today. But I wouldn't let this go. Not for a second. My grandfather had made me a promise, and I had every intention of making sure it was honored. Even if I had to tear Jane's world apart to do it. I spent the next few days trapped in a fog of disbelief. Sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, it was restless. My mind replaying the reading of the will like a broken record. The betrayal sat heavy on my chest, refusing to loosen its grip. But beneath the hurt, beneath the shock, something else was taking root. Determination. Jane thought she had won, that I would just slink away in silence. She had no idea who she was dealing with. By the fourth morning, I was done grieving. I pulled out every document I had, old emails, bank statements, anything my grandfather had ever mentioned about his estate. Something wasn't right. I knew it in my bones. My grandfather would never have left me with nothing. That meant only one thing. Jane had rewritten the truth. I just had to prove it. I started with the basics, combing through everything with a fine-tooth comb. His last will, the one they had read, was dated only months before his death. Too recent. He had been sick then, weaker than I'd ever seen him. Had he really made these changes himself? Or had Jane done it for him? Or for herself? The thought made my stomach turn. I kept digging, my hands shaking as I clicked through online records. If Jane had done something illegal, there had to be proof. A forged signature, a missing document, a financial transaction that didn't add up. And when I found it, because I would find it, Jane wouldn't just regret what she had done. She'd wish she had never crossed me in the first place. Hours blurred into days as I buried myself in paperwork, piecing together a puzzle I hadn't even realized existed. I barely ate, barely slept, surviving on coffee and sheer determination. Every document I reviewed only made my suspicions grow stronger. My grandfather's signature, one I had seen countless times, looked off. Slightly uneven, like someone had traced over it. A transaction transferring assets to Jane had been made just weeks before his death, when he was too weak to even hold a pen. I clenched my fists, heart pounding. This wasn't just greed. This was fraud. My fingers hovered over my phone, debating my next move. Lawyers? The bank? The authorities? No. Not yet. I needed more. If I confronted Jane now, she'd twist the story, paint me as a bitter, entitled granddaughter grasping at what wasn't mine. I could already hear her condescending voice. Oh, Natasha, don't embarrass yourself. Grandfather made his choice. I wasn't about to play into her hands. Instead, I took a deep breath and did what Jane had probably never expected. I reached out to people who had known my grandfather well, his lawyer, his financial advisor, even his longtime housekeeper. If Jane had forced his hand, tricked him, or worse, forged documents, someone had to know. Someone had to have seen something. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Short, blunt. Meet me tomorrow. There's something you need to see. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. This was it, the crack in Jane's perfect plan. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with possibilities. Who was this person? What did they know? And more importantly, why were they reaching out now? As I stared at my phone, the message burned into my brain. I realized one thing. If Jane had gone through so much trouble to cover her tracks, this meeting could change everything. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe early, scanning every face that walked through the door. The place smelled of burnt espresso and something sweet, but I barely noticed. Every nerve in my body was on edge. Then, a woman slipped into the seat across from me. Mid-50s, sharp eyes, a face lined with experience. She didn't introduce herself, didn't waste time. She simply placed a folder on the table and pushed it toward me. I hesitated before opening it, my fingers trembling. And there it was, proof. Documents with signatures that didn't match. Bank transfers flagged as suspicious. A copy of an older will. One that named me as the primary heir. My breath caught in my throat. My grandfather had left everything to me. Jane had wiped it away, stolen it right out from under me. I looked up at the woman, my pulse pounding. "How do you have this?" She exhaled, glancing toward the door as if she was expecting someone to barge in at any moment. "Because I was there when Jane changed everything." Her voice was low, almost regretful. "And I think it's time you knew exactly how far she was willing to go." I gripped the folder so tightly my knuckles turned white. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the chatter of the cafe around me. This was more than just stolen money. This was a crime. And Jane hadn't just manipulated a grieving old man. She had rewritten his legacy, erased his final wishes like they meant nothing. The woman across from me, Laura, a former legal assistant at my grandfather's firm, leaned in, her voice low. "I saw it happen. Your grandfather was already weak. Jane came in with new documents, told him it was just a small adjustment." She shook her head. "But the papers he signed that day weren't the ones she filed. She switched them." A chill ran through me. It was worse than I had imagined. I had expected fraud, maybe a forged signature or hidden clauses. But this was outright theft. "And no one stopped her?" I asked, my voice tight. Laura exhaled sharply. "People tried, but Jane, she's good at making problems disappear." She pressured the firm, pushed the old lawyer into early retirement. By the time anyone pieced it together, the new will was official, and no one wanted to fight her in court. My hands trembled as I shut the folder. That was the difference between Jane and me. She had relied on intimidation and silence, but I wasn't afraid of her. And I sure as hell wasn't going to be silent. I left the cafe with the folder pressed against my chest like a shield. The city buzzed around me, people moving through their day without a clue that my entire world had just shifted. Jane had stolen everything, my inheritance, my security, even my grandfather's final wishes. But now I had the power to take it all back. Back at my apartment, I spread the documents across my dining table, reading them over and over until my eyes blurred. I highlighted signatures, circled transaction dates, scribbled notes in the margins. Jane had covered her tracks well, but not perfectly. There were discrepancies, tiny cracks in her carefully constructed lie. And I would tear them wide open. By the time I picked up the phone, my decision was made. The first call was to a lawyer, a top-tier estate attorney who had no ties to my family. The second was to a forensic document analyst. If Jane had forged signatures, I needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof. The third call was to the bank. I needed access to my grandfather's financial records, if they hadn't already been buried. As I waited for callbacks, I thought about what came next. Jane would find out soon enough that I was coming for her. She would fight back, probably try to intimidate me, maybe even threaten me. But she had made one mistake. She had underestimated me. The first call came back within hours. My lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Evelyn Carter, didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I've reviewed what you sent me," she said, her voice crisp. "And if this holds up under scrutiny, you have a solid case. Forgery, fraud, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. We're looking at serious criminal charges." Hearing it framed that way sent a surge of vindication through me. Jane hadn't just wronged me. She had committed crimes, real crimes. And this time, she wouldn't be able to manipulate her way out of it. "The question is," Evelyn continued, "are you ready for what comes next? Once we file, this gets ugly. She'll fight back." I stared at the papers spread out before me. My grandfather's real will, his stolen fortune, his legacy rewritten by someone who never deserved it. Jane had already taken everything she could from me. There was nothing left to lose, except my fear. "I don't care how ugly it gets," I said, my voice steady. "I want justice." There was a brief pause, then Evelyn let out a small, approving hum. "Good, then let's begin." Filing the lawsuit felt like striking the first match in a controlled burn. It didn't take long for the fire to spread. Within days, Jane's lawyer issued a response. Cold, dismissive, exactly what I expected. "These accusations are baseless. My client acted within the full extent of the law. I could almost hear Jane's smug laugh behind those words. She still thought she was untouchable. But she had underestimated me. Evelyn moved fast, gathering sworn affidavits, hiring forensic analysts, securing subpoenaed bank records. The deeper we dug, the more damning the evidence became. The forged signatures weren't just obvious, they were sloppy. The bank transactions raised red flags even a rookie investigator could spot. And then there was the final, most damning piece, a sworn statement from Laura, the legal assistant who had watched Jane switch the documents. With everything in place, Evelyn made her move. Not just a civil lawsuit, but criminal charges, fraud, forgery, financial exploitation. Jane wasn't just facing the loss of my inheritance, she was facing prison time. And the moment she realized that, everything changed. The first sign of Jane's unraveling came in the form of a phone call. Not from her, she wasn't the type to beg, not yet, but from my uncle, the same man who had sat in silence when my name was erased from my grandfather's will. His voice was measured, but I could hear the strain beneath it. "Natasha, maybe it's time to let this go. Do you really want to drag the family through this?" I almost laughed. Now they cared about the family? Not when Jane stole everything. Not when they all turned a blind eye. Only now, when the truth threatened to burn through their carefully maintained facade. "I didn't drag the family into this," I said coolly. "Jane did that the moment she forged those documents." Silence. Then a sigh. "She's willing to settle." I gripped the phone tighter. Settle. Of course, she was. Not because she felt remorse, but because she knew she was losing. She thought she could throw money at me, buy my silence, make this all go away before it destroyed her. But this was never just about money. It was about justice. "I don't want a settlement," I said firmly. "I want the truth out. And I want Jane to answer for what she did." The silence on the other end was heavy, thick with unspoken consequences. Finally, my uncle exhaled. "Then you leave us no choice." And just like that, the last bridge between me and this family burned to ash. Jane made her first public move a week later, a carefully crafted press release full of flowery language and empty justifications. "This is a painful family dispute, blown out of proportion. My late father's wishes were honored legally and ethically." She painted herself as the victim, the misunderstood benefactor who had done nothing wrong. It was the kind of lie that might have worked, if I hadn't been prepared. Evelyn struck back fast. The very next morning, my lawsuit became public record. Fraud charges were officially filed, and the bank's forensic team confirmed what I already knew. The will had been tampered with. The moment the story hit the news, Jane's mask cracked. Her lawyer tried to stall, delay hearings, bury us in paperwork. But Evelyn was relentless, countering every move with precision. Then came the subpoena for Jane's financial records. That was the final nail in her coffin. Whatever she had been hiding, whatever else she had stolen, was about to come to light. And she knew it. The next day, my phone rang. Not my uncle this time, not one of my spineless cousins. Jane herself. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting, my fingers hovering over the answer button. She was desperate now. And desperate people? They were dangerous. I took a breath and picked up. "Jane." A pause. Then finally, her voice, stripped of arrogance, shaking with something close to fear. "Natasha, we need to talk." For a moment, I said nothing. Just let the silence stretch. Let Jane feel the weight of it. She had spent months, years, controlling the narrative, twisting reality to suit her needs. Now, she was the one waiting, uncertain, vulnerable. "What is there to talk about, Jane?" I finally said, my voice steady. "You stole from me. You lied. And now you're out of options." She exhaled sharply. "I made a mistake, okay? But this has gone too far. The lawsuit, the criminal charges. Natasha, do you really want to destroy me?" I almost laughed. Destroy her? Jane had destroyed me first. She had stolen my inheritance, erased my name from my grandfather's legacy, and expected me to disappear quietly. But now that she was backed into a corner, She wanted to negotiate. You had a chance to fix this, I said. You chose to fight instead. Now you get to live with the consequences. She let out a shaky breath. Please, I'll give you what you want. The money, the properties. Just drop the charges. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the words settle. The money. That was all this was to her. A transaction. A problem to be bought away. But it had never been about money. It was about justice. About making her answer for what she had done. I opened my eyes, my decision already made. No deal, Jane. The silence on the other end stretched thin. For the first time in her life, Jane had no power over me. No threats, no manipulation, no backroom deals to make this all disappear. She was cornered, and she knew it. Her voice, once dripping with confidence, cracked. Natasha, if this goes to trial, I could go to prison. I didn't flinch. You should have thought about that before you stole everything. She let out a bitter laugh, but there was no humor in it. You don't understand what you're doing. You're ruining this family. I cut her off. You ruined this family the day you forged that will. I'm just making sure the truth comes out. A beat of silence. Then finally she dropped the pretense. I'll fight you, she spat. I'll drag this out for years. You'll waste your life in court. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. Then I guess I'll see you there. I hung up. No more conversations. No more negotiations. The fight was over. She just didn't realize it yet. Jane's trial didn't drag out for years like she had threatened. In the end, the evidence was too overwhelming, the forged signatures too obvious, the bank transactions too damning. She tried to deny it, then shift blame, then play the victim. But none of it worked. The jury saw her for what she was. A fraud. A thief. A woman who had built her life on deception and greed. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, I didn't feel the triumphant rush I expected. No fireworks, no cinematic moment of pure victory, just a quiet, steady sense of justice. It was over. She would lose everything, her reputation, her stolen fortune, maybe even her freedom. And I would finally be free of her shadow. After the trial, people who had once stayed silent began reaching out. Cousins who had looked the other way, aunts and uncles who had whispered behind my back. I always knew something wasn't right, they said. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. But their apologies meant nothing to me now. Where had they been when it mattered? I didn't need their validation. I had won, and I had done it without them. The house felt different when I walked through its doors again. My grandfather's study, once filled with the scent of old books and cigar smoke, was exactly as I remembered. His leather chair, his desk, untouched, waiting. I ran my fingers along the edges of the desk, remembering the nights we spent here, his voice steady as he told me stories of his life, his mistakes, his lessons. People will take from you if you let them, Natasha. You have to know when to fight back. I had fought, and I had won. The inheritance was legally mine again, but I didn't care about the money. Not really. What mattered was that my grandfather's true wishes had been restored. His name, his legacy, our legacy, was no longer tainted by Jane's greed. As I stepped outside, the air felt lighter. For the first time in months, I felt free. Jane had faded into obscurity, her empire of lies reduced to nothing. And me? I was still standing, stronger, wiser, unbreakable. I walked away from the house, leaving the past behind. Whatever came next, I was ready.